Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, you know what? We're just going to skip the traditional agenda and jump straight into a deep dive of Chapter 7 of the manual. Why? Because this topic quite literally forms the absolute foundation of our military's operational success. We're talking about the relationship between officers and non-commissioned officers. And let's be clear, this isn't just about organizational charts or figuring out who salutes him. This is about the very lifeline of combat readiness. When we look at the massive, incredible machinery of the Army, it is this specific relationship that acts as the engine, the steering wheel, and the brakes, all at the exact same time.
Section 1. The Stakes of Leadership and Looking Beyond Garrison Harmony.
Okay, let's dive right into this because we have to establish the massive stakes involved here. The core warning from Chapter 7 is basically this: relationship issues do not stay in garrison. If there's friction or miscommunication or just a lack of trust at home, those unresolved issues are inevitably going to follow that team into the field. And that puts soldiers' lives at risk in combat. Because as this quote perfectly encapsulates, the gravity of this dynamic is huge. Command Sergeant Major Marcelino Malavet says the most essential dynamic of combat power is competent and confident officer and non-commissioned officer leadership. Really think about the weight of those words. Combat power isn't just about having superior firepower or the best technology. The absolute most essential dynamic is human. If this relationship fails, the primary engine of your combat power just stalls out entirely.
Moving to Section 2. Building mutual trust through coaching, counseling, and mentoring.
So how do we actually prevent that engine from stalling? How do we forge this essential dynamic? Well, it all comes down to two foundational pillars: mutual trust and common goals. Now, trust isn't just something that magically appears overnight, right? It requires dedicated coaching, counseling, and mentoring. And when you successfully build that mutual trust, the outcomes are incredibly powerful. I mean, look at the cascading effects here. Trust empowers subordinates to actually act. It encourages disciplined initiative because they know for a fact their leaders have their back. It reinforces accountability, making it a shared standard across the board. It allows for open, honest communication that solves problems way before they blow up into crises. And ultimately, this creates a deeply predictable, highly cohesive team. And the grand total of all these outcomes? It directly ensures soldier safety on the ground. Literally every single bullet point here acts like a layer of armor protecting the team.
Section 3. NCO Authorities and Roles, the Backbone and the Command. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is understanding that an officer and an NCO are not simply doing the same job at different pay grades. No way. They have distinctly different authorities that have to complement each other perfectly. We always call the NCO Corps the backbone of the Army, but how does that backbone physically connect to the brain of the command? Well, let's break down the contrast. Commissioned officers hold absolute command authority. They are legally responsible for everything their unit does or fails to do. NCOs, on the other hand, obtain their authorities as agents of the Secretary of the Army, so they don't hold command authority themselves. Instead, they carry out the orders of the Commander-in-Chief by providing vital support, assistance, discipline, and really seasoned advice to those officers. It's a perfect balance: ultimate responsibility paired directly with expert execution.
And you know, this fundamental duality, pairing that command authority with expert execution, is exactly what perfectly interlocks the chain of command. Think about it. Every new assignment is essentially a blank slate. It's a brand new opportunity for an officer and an NCO to build this interlocking structure from the ground up. When the officer's vision and authority meet the NCO's hard-earned experience and direct leadership of the troops, you don't just get a functioning unit. You get a completely unified team that is capable of overcoming almost anything.
Section 4. Communication on the ground, the platoon leader and platoon sergeant. Let's shift our focus and actually see how this ripple effect plays out at the tactical level. We're zooming in on the ground game now, where high-level strategy meets the dirt. The platoon leader and the platoon sergeant are the primary node where orders actually translate into physical action. To make this ground-level team operate successfully, they absolutely need a relentless, actionable, tactical rhythm. First, they've got to communicate constantly. Second, they must work together to counsel their troops, establish realistic standards, and share those results. Third, the platoon leader must lead the squad leaders, completely depending on their NCOs to directly lead the individual soldiers. And finally, this duo has to constantly give perspective up the chain, keeping the company commander and the first sergeant completely keyed in on the reality on the ground.
And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute most foundational rule of that tactical rhythm. The manual is super direct here. Good communication does not happen all by itself. Talk, 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 and listen, listen, listen.
Now, it seems almost too basic, right? But that is exactly why they highlight it. We often just assume that because we're standing in the same room, we're communicating. Spoiler alert, we aren't. Real communication requires active, exhausting effort. You have to force the conversation, and honestly, more importantly, you have to actively listen to your counterpart. Section 5, Command Level Dynamics. Scaling up to the CSM and the battalion commander.
All right, let's move up the chain and see how this builds. We're expanding the narrative up to the strategic command level. While the stakes at the platoon level are immediate and very visible, the dynamic between the command sergeant major and the battalion commander is organizational and widespread. Their relationship sets the tone and the operational tempo for hundreds of soldiers. So, here is the timeline of strategic unity. Step 1 is the bedrock. The CSM and commander must have honest, totally candid communications behind closed doors. Step 2, they must ensure absolute direct access. No one comes between them. And step 3, this is where discipline really shines. The CSM provides their best, unvarnished advice, but the moment the commander makes that final decision, the CSM fully and publicly supports it as if it were their very own idea. But the CSM's job absolutely doesn't stop at just advising the battalion commander. They have this massive cascading responsibility to advise and mentor all the leadership teams below them. The CSM actively monitors and advises the relationships between company commanders and their first sergeants. Plus, they play a critical role in assisting all unit leaders in understanding the commander's training guidance, making sure that those really complex directives translate cleanly into company-level evaluations. Basically, the CSM is the vital connective tissue for the entire battalion's leadership structure. So we've covered the officer and NCO dynamic all the way from the platoon up to the battalion. But let's pivot the narrative for a second and look at the wider support structure. Ask yourself this question. Beyond the uniformed men and women standing in formation, who else is out there serving alongside soldiers in all operational environments? Who else is critical to ensuring this giant machine keeps moving forward? Section 6, Army-Civilian Partnerships and the largest civilian workforce in the DoD. The answer for sure is the dedicated professionals of the Army civilian workforce. It is absolutely vital that we understand their role, because the Army currently employs the largest civilian workforce in the entire Department of Defense. Let's talk about their immense contributions. First up, they provide mission-essential capability and institutional stability during both war and peace. Uniformed personnel rotate out every few years, right? Army civilians are often the ones providing the long-term memory of an organization. Second, it's crucial to remember that they actually take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, exactly like our soldiers do. And third, with the sole exception of direct combat operations, Army civilians are serving right alongside soldiers in virtually all operational environments. So, the crucial point from Chapter 7 is right here. NCOs must afford Army civilians the exact same level of respect given to fellow soldiers. Whether you're working directly over them, under their supervision, or just alongside them as peers, there is no separate tier of professionalism. None. The NCO has to understand the role these civilians play and utilize their incredible expertise to take care of soldiers and get the mission done. Respect isn't a bonus here. It's the absolute baseline requirement. But it goes beyond just basic respect. It takes actual knowledge and effort. NCOs are total masters of military regulations, but they also need to make it a priority to know the rules and regulations that govern Army civilians. By understanding these unique frameworks, NCOs can drastically reduce friction. That understanding is what allows leaders to build stronger relationships, properly leverage civilian expertise, and create a highly stable cooperative climate. And that is a real game changer for overall mission success. We have covered a ton of ground today, from the platoon sergeant and platoon leader, scaling all the way up to the command sergeant major, the battalion commander, and of course, our vital Army civilian partners. Every single one of these interactions relies on deliberate communication, deep mutual trust, and a shared commitment to the mission. But as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a deep, personal reflection. Look at your own unit. Look at your counterparts. Are your relationships ready for combat? Because let me tell you, if they aren't working here in Garrison today, they will fail you when you need them most tomorrow. Take the time to build that trust right now. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next one.